Hey guys, it's Cal from the Lighting Doctor here. This is going to be part of our Ask the Lighting Doctor series. You can check out our playlist on YouTube, and it's going to be all the questions that you guys get. So I just recently got a question about low voltage landscape lighting wire, and instead of just emailing the guy back, I thought I would shoot this quick video because I'm sure lots of you guys have this question about what size and what kind of wire to use. Because if you're watching a lot of videos about low voltage landscape lighting on YouTube, most of them are fairly old. They're, even 4, 5, 6 years old or more, and they're talking about halogen systems that something called voltage drop. And I'm not going to get too technical, but it's something you need to worry a lot more about when you are using a halogen system. The reason being is one light in a halogen system will usually use about 20 watts, whereas with an LED, that to get that same light output, you're down to like 4 watts now with how efficient the lights are getting. So with that being said, the more wattage you have on a line, the more you got to worry about voltage drop. So if you had even 5 lights at 20 watts each, I mean, you're at 100 watts, you got to start worrying about voltage drop. Now, if you're only using 4 watts per light, I mean, you can fit like 25 lights on that same line before you got to start worrying about it. So the question was, what's the best type of wire to use for an LED landscape lighting system? And typically what we use is 12-2 direct burial wire, and 12-2 just seems to be, it's kind of the most standard size. You typically don't need to get much bigger than that, and bigger is actually the opposite. So like 10-2 or 10 gauge wire is bigger. You used to have to use that a lot more if you had to run a fair bit of halogen lights on a system, because it decreases the amount of voltage drop, so you had to have a bigger wire. But if you're using 12-2 wire, you should easily be able to fit roughly 20 lights on that one line going directly to your transformer, and run those roughly 200 to 300 feet out before you really have to start worrying about voltage drop. Now that also depends on the kind of light you buy. The cheaper the light you buy, the more power that's going to draw. Even though it might say it's a 4-watt bulb, it's going to draw a little bit more power than that because the bulb is not that efficient. So the higher efficiency the bulb is, it's going to be closer to that actual wattage that's on that lamp. The cheaper the light, a 4-watt bulb might actually draw like 7 watts. So again, I'll preach this forever and ever, but don't skimp, because the cheaper lights you get, you're going to deal with more of those problems. And the same thing goes with wire. If you just get some cheap wire that you find at the big box store, it's not the same. You might think it's the same, but it's not. The jackets on the wire are not built the same, and over time, that wire becomes hard like rebar. So if you ever need to make any repairs, it's horrible to deal with, and the jacket usually like melts on that wire, so you can't even strip it after a period of time. So just like the lights, you get what you pay for with wire as well. Now you can get to smaller wire. If you're running a really small system, you only have a few LED lights, you can get down to like 14 gauge wire, 16 18 gauge. If you notice, most fixtures coming off of them have a very small and thin wire. That's typically a 16 or 18 gauge wire that they have off of there, because you're only having that wire for maybe 10, 25 feet coming off of that fixture, like the lead wire that's built into it. There's not going to be really any voltage drop, and it's just one light. So I mean, you have 5 watts on that, you can do that. And if you're doing a smaller system, you can get away with using smaller wire, which is going to save you a little bit of money, but not a ton. 12-2 is kind of the most common standard wire that's out there, and I'm saying if you want to make it simple and you're putting a system that has under 20 lights, get 12-2, because it's also going to give you the ability to add on later if you want without causing a whole bunch of problems. The bigger wire just gets a lot more expensive. It's harder to work with. The smaller wire, all of a sudden you have to start worrying about voltage drop and stuff. Some kits that are online will sell smaller wire because it is cheaper. Obviously, most of the stuff you find at the big box stores is not going to be 12 gauge wire. It's going to be smaller. Why? Because it's cheaper, but you can only add so many lights on it. And I'm just saying, with 12-2, run 20 lights. You can run them 200-300 feet out. You don't really have to worry about it. If you're running more lights than that, I'm going to suggest probably trying to find a contractor that's going to help you either design and install the system. But if you're still going to do it yourself, just have 2 separate runs on that. So, 20 lights going out on 12-2 wire this way, and then maybe your other 20 lights is on a whole new wire coming to your transformer. So hopefully that makes sense. I didn't want to get into a whole bunch of voltage drop stuff because, again, with LED, it's not nearly as important. I will look up 12-2 voltage drop PDF. I'll try and throw a link below this video so you can see that. I might even try and find somewhere to upload it on my website at lightingdoctor.ca so you can find that. It'll give you a rough idea of what you should worry about with voltage drop and see why with LED you don't have to as much. And you know what? I'll actually attach a short video after this explaining a voltage drop sheet for you, so it makes it even easier and will just help justify why you don't really need to worry about it if you're using an LED system and you're not cheaping out and buying cheap crap, because that will cause you issues that it's just going to cause you issues. So I hope this helped to answer your question, Gomez, and I'll show you a little bit about the voltage drop calculator and why we typically choose 12-2 wire. Thanks for watching. Hey guys, I don't want to go too crazy talking about voltage drop because, again, with LED it's not as big of an issue. But again, don't cheap on the lights or anything, because the more you cheap on the lights and the wire and stuff, the more you're going to have to worry about this. And it's the cheaper the system you buy, it doesn't always say it. It might say it's using 4 watts, but most of those lights will use more than that. But I'll just quickly explain. This is a 12 gauge cable voltage drop chart. Basically, all it's telling you is that depending on your total wattage, so if you add up the wattage of all your lights, so say you have 4 watt LED bulbs in all your lamps, and you have, let's call it 20 of them, that's 80 watts total. So if you go to here, the wattage load, you're going to be 80. And then how far out are you running that wire? So you can see pink is bad, and white is good. But also know that the difference between halogen and LED is with LED bulbs, they're designed to run, good ones, again, not cheap ones. Cheap ones will not work properly, but good ones will run even if they only get 9 volts of power. So if you have a 12 volt tap, you can lose at least 3 watts or 3 volts before you deal with any issues. So if you have 80 watts, you can run basically 150 feet of cable. You can run more than that. I'm going to say you can run almost 200 feet of cable off with 80 watts, which is 20 lights, before you need to worry about voltage drop. And if you get a larger transformer that has, instead of a 12 volt tap, it has a 15 volt tap, then you can lose up to 6 volts without having any issues. So I mean, you can run that over 300 feet on a 12 gauge wire, 20 lights on one line off a 15 volt tap and not have any issues with LED. If you're running a halogen system, this whole thing gets a lot more confusing, but I just wanted to show you why LED makes it so much easier, is because you can throw 100 watts, and if you're using a good transformer, I mean, you can run 250 feet, you can run like 25 lights 250 feet out without having to worry about voltage drop. That's why I don't talk about it a lot. The smaller cable, the more you got to worry about. So if you start getting into 14 gauge, 16 gauge, and 18 gauge, obviously there's a lot less room for error. That's why we often suggest use 12 gauge as much as possible, because that's, one, it's the easiest to find. It's going to give you the most flexibility. You can add on down the road and so many things. So hopefully that kind of helped explain voltage drop in a simple way. But basically, to reiterate, with LED, you don't need to worry about it a whole lot.